Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it.
The driver won't choose you again,
They said.
He wants big, strong engines like us.
Edward had not been out for a long time. He began to feel sad. Just then, the driver and fireman came along to start work. The driver looked at Edward.
Why are you sad?
He asked.
Would you like to come out today? Yes, please,
Said Edward. So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away.
Beep, beep.
He whistled.
Look at me now.
The others were very cross at being left behind. Away went Edward to get some coaches.
Be careful, Edward.
Said the coaches.
Don't bump and bang us like the other engines do.
So Edward came up to the coaches, very, very gently, and the shunter fastened the coupling.
Thank you, Edward.
Said the coaches.
That was kind. We are glad you are taking us today.
Then they went to the station, where the people were waiting.
Beep, beep.
Whistled Edward.
Get in quickly, please.
So the people got in quickly, and Edward waited happily for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag. He waited, and waited. There was no whistle, no green flag.
Peep, 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 peep. Where is that guard?
Edward was getting anxious. The driver and fireman asked the station master.
Have you seen the guard? No.
He said. They asked the porter.
Have you seen the guard?
Yes, last night.
Said the porter. Edward began to get cross.
Are we ever going to start?
He said. Just then a little boy shouted.
Here he comes!
And there was the guard running down the hill with his flags in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He ran onto the platform, blew his whistle, and jumped into his van. Edward puffed off. He did have a happy day. All the children ran to wave as he went past, and he met old friends at all the stations. He worked so hard that the driver promised to take him out again next day.
I'm going out again tomorrow.
He told the other engines that night in the shed.
What do you think of that?
But he didn't hear what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He was a fussy little engine, always pulling coaches about. He pulled them to the station ready for the big engines to take out on long journeys. And when trains came in and the people had got out, he would pull the empty coaches away so that the big engines could go and rest. He was a cheeky little engine too. He thought no engine worked as hard as he did, so he used to play tricks on them. He liked best of all to come quietly beside a big engine dozing on a siding.
Beep, beep, beep! Wake up, lazy bones!
He would whistle.
Why'd you work hard like me?
Then he would laugh rudely and run away to find some more coaches. One day Gorn was resting on a siding. He was very tired. The big express he always pulled had been late, and he had to run as fast as he could to make up for lost time. He was just going to sleep when Thomas came up in his cheeky way.
Wake up, lazy bones!
He whistled,
Do some hard work for a change. Can't catch me!
and he ran off laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gorn thought how he could pay Thomas out. One morning Thomas wouldn't wake up. His driver and fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out and there was not enough steam. It was nearly time for the express. The people were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last Thomas started.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
He yawned,
Come on,
said the coaches.
hurry up.
Thomas gave them a rude bump and started for the station.
Don't stop dawdling. Don't stop dawdling.
He grumbled,
Where have you been? Where have you been?
asked the coaches crossly. Thomas fussed into the station where Gorn was waiting.
Boop, boop, boop. Hurry up, you.
Said Gorn crossly,
Beep, beep, beep. Hurry yourself.
said cheeky Thomas.
Yes,
Said Gorn.
I will.
And almost before the coaches had stopped moving, Gorn came out of his siding and was coupled to the train.
Boop, boop.
He whistled,
Get in quickly, please.
so the people got in quickly. The signal went down, the clock struck the hour, the guard waved his green flag, and Gorn was ready to start. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first, so that when the train was running nicely, he could stop and go back. This time he was late, and Gorn started so quickly that they forgot to uncouple Thomas.
Boop, boop.
Said Gorn,
Peep, peep, peep.
whistled Thomas.
Come on, come on.
Puffed Gorn to the coaches.
Pull harder. Pull harder.
Puffed Thomas to Gorn. The heavy train slowly began to move out of the station. The train went faster and faster. Too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't.
Beep, beep. Stop, stop.
He whistled.
Hurry, hurry, hurry.
Laughed Gorn in front.
You can't get away, you can't get away.
Laughed the coaches. Poor Thomas was going faster than he had ever gone before. He was out of breath and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on.
I shall never be the same again.
He thought sadly.
My wheels will be quite worn out.
At last they stopped at a station. Everyone laughed to see Thomas puffing and panting behind. They uncoupled him, put him onto a turntable, and then he ran on a siding out of the way.
Well, little Thomas,
chuckled Gordon as he passed.
Now you know what hard work means, don't you?
Poor Thomas couldn't answer. He had no breath. He just puffed slowly away to rest, and had a long, long drink. He went home very slowly, and was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again. Thomas and Bertie. One day Thomas was waiting at the junction when a bus came into the yard.
Hello, who are you?
I'm Bertie. Who are you?
I'm Thomas. I run this line.
So you're Thomas. Ah, I remember now. You were stuck in the snow. I took your passengers and Terrence pulled you out. I've come to help you with your passengers today.
Help me.
Said Thomas crossly, going bluer than ever and letting off steam.
I can go faster than you.
You can't.
I can.
I'll race you.
Said Bertie. The drivers agreed. The station master said,
Are you ready? Go.
and they were off. Thomas never could go fast at first, and Bertie drew in front. Thomas was running well, but he did not hurry.
Why don't you go fast? Why don't you go fast?
Called Annie and Clavel anxiously.
Wait and see. Wait and see.
Hissed Thomas.
He's a long way ahead. A long way ahead.
They wailed, but Thomas didn't mind. He remembered the level crossing. There was Bertie fuming at the gates, while they sailed gaily through.
Goodbye, Bertie.
Called Thomas. The road left the railway and went through a village, so they couldn't see Bertie. They stopped at a station.
Quickly, please.
Called Thomas. Everybody got out quickly. The guard blew his whistle, and off they went.
Come along, come along.
Sang Thomas.
We're coming along. We're coming along.
Sang Annie and Clarabel.
Hurry, hurry, hurry.
Panted Thomas, looking straight ahead. Then he whistled shrilly in horror, for Bertie was crossing the bridge over the railway, tooting triumphantly on his horn.
Oh, dearie me. Oh, dearie me.
Groaned Thomas.
He's a long way in front. A long way in front.
Wailed Annie and Clarabel.
Steady, Thomas.
Said his driver.
We'll beat Bertie yet.
We'll beat Bertie yet. We'll beat Bertie yet.
Echoed Annie and Clarabel.
We'll do it. We'll do it.
Panted Thomas bravely.
Oh, bother. There's a station.
As he stopped, he heard a toot.
Goodbye, Thomas. You must be tired. Sorry I can't stop. We buses have to work, you know. Goodbye.
The next station was by the river. They got there quickly, but the signal was down.
Oh dear, we've lost.
But he felt better after a drink. Then Jenks rattled through with a goods train, and the signal dropped, showing the line was clear.
Hurrah, we're off. Hurrah, we're off.
Puffed Thomas gaily. As they rumbled over the bridge, they heard an impatient,
Toot, toot.
and there was Bertie waiting at the red light, while cars and lorries crossed the narrow bridge in the opposite direction. Road and railway ran up the valley side by side. A stream tumbling between. Thomas had not crossed the bridge when Bertie started with a roar and soon shot ahead. Excited passengers in the train and bus cheered and shouted across the valley. Now Thomas had reached his full speed, and foot by foot, yard by yard, he gained, till they were running level. Bertie tried hard, but Thomas was too fast. Slowly but surely he drew ahead, till whistling triumphantly, he plunged into the tunnel, leaving Bertie toiling far behind.
I've done it! I've done it!
Panted Thomas in the tunnel.
We've done it, hooray! We've done it, hooray!
Chanted Annie Incredible, and whistling proudly, they whooshed out of the tunnel into the last station. The passengers gave Thomas 3 cheers and told the station master and the porters all about the race. When Bertie came in, they gave him 3 cheers too.
Well done, Thomas. That was fun. But to beat you over that hill, I should have to grow wings and be an aeroplane.
Thomas and Bertie now keep each other very busy. Bertie finds people in the villages who want to go by train and takes them to Thomas, while Thomas brings people to the station for Bertie to take home. They often talk about their race, but Bertie's passengers don't like being bounced like peas in a frying pan, and the Fat Controller has warned Thomas about what happens to engines who race at dangerous speeds. So all thought, between you and me, they would like to have another race. I don't think they ever will.
Coal. I suffer dreadfully, and no one cares.
Rubbish, Henry. You don't work hard enough.
Henry was bigger than James, but smaller than Gordon. Sometimes he could pull trains, sometimes he had no strength at all. The Fat Controller spoke to him, too.
You are too expensive, Henry. You have had lots of new parts and new paint too, but they've done you no good. If we can't make you better, we must get another engine instead of you.
This made Henry, his driver, and his fireman very sad. The Fat Controller was waiting when Henry came to the platform. He had taken off his hat and coat and put on overalls. He climbed to the footplate and Henry started.
Henry is a bad steamer. I build up his fire, but it doesn't give enough heat.
Henry tried very hard, but it was no good. He had not enough steam, and they stopped outside Edward Station. Oh dear, thought Henry sadly. I shall have to go away. Oh dear, oh dear. Edward took charge of the train. Henry stopped behind.
What do you think is wrong, fireman?
Asked the Fat Controller. The fireman mopped his face.
Excuse me, sir, but the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately and today's is worse. The other engines can manage. They have big fireboxes. Henry's is small and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine.
It's expensive,
said the Fat Controller thoughtfully.
but Henry must have a fair chance. James shall go and fetch some.
When the Welsh call came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited.
Now we'll show them, Henry, old fellow.
They carefully oiled his joints and polished his brass till it shone like gold. His fire had already been lit, so the fireman made it carefully. He put large lumps of coal like a wool round the outside. Then he covered the glowing metal parts with smaller lumps. "You're spoiling my fire," complained Henry.
Wait and see. We'll have a roaring fire just when we want it.
He was right. When Henry reached the platform, the water was boiling nicely, and he had to let off steam to show how happy he was. He made such a noise that the Fat Controller came out to see him.
How are you, Henry?
"Beep, beep, beep," whistled Henry. "I feel fine."
Have you a good fire driver?
Never better, sir, and plenty of steam.
No record breaking. Don't push him too hard.
Henry won't need pushing, sir. I'll have to hold him back.
Henry had a lovely day. He had never felt so well in his life. He wanted to go fast, but his driver wouldn't let him.
Steady, old fellow. There's plenty of time.
They arrived early at the junction. "Where have you been, lazy bones?" asked Henry when Thomas puffed in. "I can't wait for dawdling tank engines like you. Goodbye!"
Whoosh! Have you ever seen anything like it?
Both Annie and Clabel agreed that they never had. The Flying Kipper. Lots of ships use the harbor at the big station by the sea. The passenger ships have spotless paint and shining brass. Other ships, far smaller and dirtier, are important too. They take coal, machinery and other things aboard, and bring back meat, timber, and things we need. Fishing boats also come here. They unload their fish on the quay. Some of it is sent to shops in the town, and some goes in a special train to the other places far away. The railwaymen call this train the Flying Kipper. One winter evening, Henry's driver said,
We'll be out early tomorrow. We've got to take the Flying Kipper. Don't tell Gordon, but I think if we pull the Kipper nicely, the Fat Controller will let us pull the Express.
"Hurrah!" cried Henry, excited. "That will be lovely!" He was ready at 5 o'clock. There was snow and frost. Men hustled and shouted, loading the vans with crates of fish. The last door banged, the guard showed his green lamp, and they were off. Come on! Come on! Don't be silly! Don't be silly! Puffed Henry to the vans as his wheels slipped on the icy whales. The van shuddered and groaned. Truck trick! All right! They answered grudgingly. That is better! Puffed Henry more happily as the train began to gather speed. Thick clouds of smoke and steam poured from his funnel into the cold air, and when his firemen put on more coal, the fire's light shone brightly on the snow around. Hurry! Panted Henry. They whooshed on the bridges and clattered through stations, green signal lights showing as they passed. They were going well. The light grew better, and a yellow signal appeared ahead. Distant signal up, thought Henry. Caution! His driver, shutting off steam, prepared to stop, but the home signal was down.
All clear, Henry. Away we go.
They couldn't know the points from the main line to a siding were frozen, and that the signal had been set at danger, but a fall of snow had forced it down. A goods train waited in the siding to let the Flying Kipper pass. The driver and fireman were drinking cocoa in the brake van. The guard pulled out his watch.
The Kipper is due.
Who cares? This is good cocoa. The driver got up.
Come on, fireman. Back to our engine.
Hey! I haven't finished my cocoa yet! A sudden crash! The brake van broke. The three men shot in the air like jacks in the box and landed in the snow outside. Henry's driver and the fireman jumped clear before the crash. The fireman fell headfirst into a heap of snow. He kicked so hard that the driver couldn't pull him out. Henry sprawled on his side. He looked surprised. The goods train fireman waved his empty mug. You clumsy great engine! The best cup of cocoa I've ever had! And you bump into me and spill it all!
Never mind your cocoa, fireman. Run and telephone the breakdown gang.
The gang soon cleared the line, but they had hard work lifting Henry to the rails. The Fat Controller came to see him. The signal was down, sir.
Cheer up, Henry, it wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. Then you'll feel a different engine and won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice?
Yes, sir, thought Henry, doubtfully. Henry liked being at Crewe, but was glad to come home. A crowd of people waited to see him arrive in his new shape. He looked so splendid and strong that they gave him 3 cheers. Thank you very much, he whistled happily. I am sorry to say that a lot of little boys are often late for school because they wait to see Henry go by. They often see him pulling the express, and he does it so well that Gorn is jealous. But that is another story. Thomas, in trouble. There is a line to a quarry at the end of Thomas's branch line. It goes for some distance along the road. Thomas was always very careful here, in case anyone was coming.
Beep, beep.
He whistled. Then the people got out of the way, and he puffed slowly along with his trucks rumbling behind him. Early one morning there was no one on the road, but a large policeman was sitting on the grass close by. He was shaking a stone from his boot. Thomas liked policemen. He had been a great friend of the constable who used to live in the village, but he had just retired. Thomas expected that the new constable would be friendly too.
Beep, beep. Good morning.
The policeman jumped and dropped his boot. He scrambled up and hopped around on the one leg till he was facing Thomas. Thomas was sorry to see that he didn't look friendly at all. He was red in the face and very cross. The policeman wobbled about, trying to keep his balance.
Disgraceful!
He spluttered.
I didn't sleep a wink last night. It was so quiet. And our engines come whistling suddenly behind me. My first day in the country, too.
He picked up his boot and hopped over to Thomas.
Sorry, sir. I only said good morning.
The policeman grunted, and leaning against Thomas's buffer, he put his boot on. He threw himself up and pointed to Thomas.
Where's your cowcatcher?
He asked accusingly.
But I don't catch cows, sir.
Don't be funny!
Snapped the policeman. He looked at Thomas's wheels.
No side plates either!
And he wrote in his book.
Engines going on public roads must have their wheels covered and a cowcatcher in front. You haven't, so you're dangerous to the public.
Rubbish. We've been here hundreds of times and never had an accident.
That makes it worse,
the policeman answered. He wrote regular lawbreaker in his book. Thomas puffed sadly away. The fat controller was having breakfast. He was eating toast and marmalade. He had the newspaper open in front of him, and his wife had just given him some more coffee. The butler knocked and came in. "Excuse me, sir, you are wanted on the telephone."
Bother that telephone,
said the fat controller.
I'm sorry, my dear. Thomas is in trouble with the police, and I must go at once.
He gulped down his coffee and hurried from the room. At the junction, Thomas's driver told the fat controller what had happened.
Dangerous to the public, indeed. We'll see about that.
And he climbed grimly into Annie. The policeman was on the platform at the other end. The fat controller spoke to him at once, and a crowd collected to listen. Other policemen came to see what was happening, and the fat controller argued with them too, but it was no good.
The law is the law,
they said,
and we can't change it.
The fat controller felt exhausted. He mopped his face.
I'm sorry, driver. It's no use arguing with policemen. We will have to make those cowcatcher things for Thomas, I suppose.
Everyone will laugh, sir. They'll say I look like a tram.
The fat controller stared. Then he laughed.
Well done, Thomas. Why didn't I think of it before? We want a tram engine. When I was on my holiday, I met a nice little engine called Toby. He hasn't enough work to do and needs a change. I'll write to his controller at once.
A few days later, Toby arrived.
That's a good engine. I see you've brought Henrietta.
You don't mind, do you, sir? The station master wanted to use her as a hen house.
Asked Toby anxiously.
And that would never do.
No, indeed. We couldn't allow that.
Toby made the trucks behave even better than Thomas did. At first, Thomas was jealous, but he was so happy when Toby rang his bell and made the policeman jump that they have been firm friends ever since.
Edward's exploit. Edward scolded the twins severely, but told Gordon it served him right. Gordon was furious. A few days later, some enthusiasts came. On their last afternoon, they went to the China Clay Works. Edward found it hard to start the heavy train.
Did you see him straining?
Asked Henry.
Positively painful,
Remarked James.
just pathetic.
Grunted Gordon.
He should give up and be preserved before it's too late.
Shut up!
Burst out Duck.
You're all jealous. Edward's better than any of you.
You're right, Duck,
said Boko.
Edward's old, but he'll surprise us all.
Bill and Ben were delighted with their visitors. They loved being photographed and took the party to the workings in a brake van special. On the way home, however, the weather changed. Wind and rain buffeted Edward. His sanding gear failed, his wheels slipped, and his fireman rode in front, dropping sand on the rails by hand.
Come on, come on, come on.
Panted Edward breathlessly.
This is dreadful.
But there was worse to come. Before his driver could check them, his wheels slipped fiercely again and again. With a shrieking crack, something broke and battered his frame and splashes up and out of shape. The passengers gathered round while the crew inspected the damage. Repairs took some time.
One of your crank pins broke, Edward,
said his driver at last.
We've taken your side rods off. Now you're a single, like an old-fashioned engine. Can you get these people home? They must start back tonight.
I'll try, sir,
promised Edward. They backed down to where the line was more nearly level. Edward puffed and pulled his hardest, but his wheels kept slipping and he just could not start the heavy train. The passengers were getting anxious. Driver, fireman and guard went along the train, making adjustments between the coaches.
We've loosened the couplings, Edward,
they said.
Now you can pick up your coaches one by one, just as you do with trucks.
That'll be much easier,
said Edward gratefully. So with the fireman standing carefully in front, the driver gently opened the regulator.
Come on,
puffed Edward. He moved cautiously forward, ready to take the strain as his tender coupling tightened against the weight of the first coach. The first coach moving helped to start the second second helped the third, and so on down the train.
I've done it! I've done it!
Puffed Edward, his wheels spinning with excitement.
Steady, boy,
warned his driver, skillfully checking the wheel slip.
Well done, boy. You've got them. You've got them.
And he listened happily to Edward's steady beat as he forged slowly but surely up the hill. The passengers were thrilled, most of their heads out of the windows. They waved and shouted, cheering Edward on. The Fat Controller paced the platform. Henry with the special train waited anxiously too. They heard her beep beep. Then battered, weary, but unbeaten, Edward steamed in. The Fat Controller stepped angrily forward. He pointed to the clock, but excited passengers swept him aside. They cheered Edward, his driver and fireman to the echo before rushing off to get in Henry's train. Henry steamed away to another storm of cheers, but not before everyone knew Edward's story. Edward went thankfully to the shed, while Duck and Boko saw to it that he was left in peace. Gordon and James remained respectfully silent. The Fat Controller asked Boko to look after Edward's line while he was being mended. Boko was pleased. He worked well, and now they run it together. Bill and Ben still tease him, but Boko doesn't mind. He lives at Edward Station, but is welcome anywhere, for he is now one of the family. Donald and Douglas were the last to accept him, but he often helps with their goods trains, and the other day they were heard to remark,
"For a diesel, young Boko's needs such a bad sort of engine."
That, from the Caledonian twins, is high praise indeed. Gordon goes foreign. Lots of people travel to the big station at the end of the line. Engines from the other railways sometimes pull their trains. These engines stay the night and go home next day. Gordon was talking one day to one of these.
"When I was young and green,"
he said,
"I remember going to London. Do you know the place? The station's called King's Cross."
King's Cross?
snorted the engine.
London's Euston. Everybody knows that.
Rubbish,
said Duck.
London's Paddington. I know. I worked there.
They argued till they went to sleep. They argued when they woke up. They were still arguing when the other engine went away.
"Stupid thing,"
said Gordon crossly.
"I've no patience."
Stupid yourself,
said Duck.
London's Paddington. Paddington! Do you hear?
"Stop arguing,"
James broke in.
"You make me tired. You both agreed about something anyway."
What's that?
"London's not Euston,"
laughed James.
"Now shut up."
Gordon rolled away, still grumbling.
"I'm sure it's King's Cross. I'll go and prove it."
But that was easier said than done. London lay beyond the big station at the other end of the line. Gordon had to stop there. Another engine then took his train.
If I didn't stop,
he thought,
I could go to London.
One day, he ran right through the station. Another time, he tried to start before the fireman could uncouple the coaches. He tried all sorts of tricks, but it was no good. His driver checked him every time.
Oh dear,
he thought sadly.
I'll never get there.
One day, he pulled the express to the station as usual. His driver uncoupled the coaches and he ran onto his siding to wait till it was time to go home. The coaches waited and waited at the platform, but their engine didn't come. A porter ran across and spoke to Gordon's driver. "The inspector's on the platform. He wants to see you." The driver climbed down from the cab and walked over to the station. He came back in a few minutes, looking excited.
"Hello,"
said the fireman.
"What happened?"
The engine for the express turned over when it was coming out of the yard. Nothing else can come in or out. They want us to take the train to London. I said we would, if the Fat Controller agreed. They telephoned and he said we could do it. How's that?
Fine,
said the fireman.
We'll show him what the Fat Controller's engines can do.
Come on,
said Gordon.
Let's go.
He rolled quickly over the crossings and backed onto the train. It was only a few minutes before the guard blew his whistle, but Gordon thought it was ages.
Come on, come on.
He puffed to the coaches.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
We're going to town! We're going to town!
Sang the coaches slowly at first, then faster and faster. Gordon found that London was a long way away.
Never mind,
he said.
I like a good long run to stretch my reels.
But all the same, he was glad when London came in sight. The Fat Controller came into his office next morning. He looked at the letters on his desk. One had a London postmark.
I wonder how Gordon's getting on,
he said. The station master knocked and came in. He looked excited.
Excuse me, sir, have you seen the news?
Not yet. Why?
Just look at this, sir.
The Fat Controller took the newspaper.
Good gracious me,
he said.
There's Gordon. Headlines too. Famous engine at London station. Police called to control crowds.
The Fat Controller read on, absorbed. Gordon returned next day. The Fat Controller spoke to his driver and fireman.
I see you had a good welcome in London.
We certainly
did, sir.
We
signed autographs till our arms ached, and Gordon had his photograph taken from so many directions at once that he didn't know which way to look.
Good,
smiled the Fat Controller.
I expect he enjoyed himself, didn't you, Gordon?
No, sir, I didn't.
Why ever not?
London's all wrong,
answered Gordon sadly.
They've changed it. It isn't King's Cross anymore. It's St. Pancras.
Gallant old engine.
I'm ashamed of you, Duncan,
said Skarloey.
You should think of your passengers.
Passengers are just nuisances, always complaining.
Skarloey was shocked.
That's no way to talk,
he said.
Passengers are our calling water. No passengers means no trains. No trains means no railway. Then we'd be on the scrap heap, my engine. And don't you forget it. Thank goodness Renes is coming home. Perhaps he'll teach you sense before it's too late.
What does Renes got to do with it?
Renes saved our railway,
said Skarloey.
Please tell us about it,
begged Peter Sam.
The year before you came,
said the old engine.
Things were very bad. We were on our last wheels. Mr. Hugh was driver and fireman, while the thing controller was guard. He did everything else too, and helped Mr. Hugh mend us in the shed. We expect 2 fresh engines next year, they told us, but we must keep the trains going now. If we don't, our railway will close.
How awful,
said Peter Sam in sympathy.
I tried hard, though I couldn't do much, but Renes understood. It's my turn now, he said. You've done more than your share of hard work. He was often short of steam, but he always tried to struggle to his station and rest there. That,
said Skarloey earnestly,
is most important with passengers.
Sure,
exclaimed Duncan.
Passengers,
Skarloey continued,
don't mind stopping at stations. They can get out and walk about. That's what stations are for. but they get very cross if we stop at wrong places like viaducts. Then they say we're a bad railway and never come back. I remember René stopping at a wrong place once,
said Skarloey.
He couldn't help it, but he made up for it afterwards. That afternoon he had damp rails and a full train. There were passengers even in Beatrice, the guard's van. His wheels slipped dreadfully on the steep bit after the first station, but they gripped at last. The worst's over, he thought. Now we're away. Come along, he sang to the coaches. Come along. Oh! I've got cramp, he groaned. He stopped, unable to move on the loneliest part of the line. The thing controller and Mr. Hewig examined him carefully. The passengers watched and waited. René eyed them anxiously. They looked cross. At last, the thing controller stood up. Your valve gear on one side had jammed, he said. We've unfastened the rods and tied them up. Now, René, he went on, we need to reach the next station. Can you pull us there on one cylinder? I'll try, sir, but the next station isn't the right station. Will the passengers be cross? Don't worry, smiled the thing controller. They know we can't reach the top station today. The thing controller sounded the rails. Passengers from Beatrice pushed behind. Mr. Hugh gently eased out the regulator. The train jerked and began to move. I'll do it! I'll do it! Everyone cheered, but René heard nothing. The thing controller's relying on me. If I fail, the railway will close. It mustn't. I'll get there or burst. Everything blurred. He was too tired to move another yard, but he did. And another. And another. And another. Till I've got there at last, he sighed with relief. It's proud of you I am indeed, said Mr. Hugh. All René remembered about the journey down was having to go on going on. At the big station, the passengers liked him. We expected a long walk, they said, but you brought us home. We'll come again and bring our friends. You're a gallant little engine, said the thing controller. When you're rested, we'll mend you ready for tomorrow.
Was René always ready for tomorrow?
Always,
smiled Skarloey.
Whatever happened, René always pulled his trains.
It was Duncan who broke the silence.
Thank you for telling us about René,
he said.
I was wrong. Passengers are important after all.
All the little engines were at the wharf on the day that René came home. Some of the Fat Controller's engines were there too. Edward pushed René's truck to the siding, and Skarloey pulled him neatly to his own rails. This was the signal for a chorus of whistles from engines large and small. You never heard such a noise in all your life. The owner, René, and other important people made speeches. The band played, and everyone was very happy. But René was happiest of all in his own place that night, next to his friend Skarloey.
Oh, this helps a little engine to feel,
he said,
that at last he has really come home.
Grandpath. Once upon a time, 3 little engines lived in their own little shed on their own little railway. Duke was brown, Falcon blue, and Stuart green. Duke was the oldest. He had been the first engine on the line and named after the Duke of Sodor. He was proud of this and wanted everything just so. Whenever the others did anything they shouldn't, he would say,
"That would never suit his grace."
Other engines came and went, but Duke outlasted them all. Stuart and Falcon used to call him Grandpuff. Duke was fond of them and tried to keep them in order. They were fond of him too, as he was so wise and kind, but they did get tired of hearing about his grace. Sometimes they would wink at each other and chant solemnly,
Engines come and engines go. Grandpuff goes on forever.
You impertinent scallywags.
Duke would say indignantly.
Whatever are young engines coming to these days?
Never mind, Grandpuff. We're only young ones.
Well, you better mind, unless you want to end up like number 2.
Ooh, Grandpuff. Whatever happened?
Number 2,
said Duke,
was American and very cocky. He rode roughly and often came off the rails. I warned him to be careful. Listen, bud, he drawled. In the States, we wouldn't give a dime about a few spills. What we do here, I said, but he just laughed. But he didn't laugh when Manager took away his wheels and said he was gonna make him useful at last.
Why? What did he do?
He turned him into a pumping engine. He's still there behind our shed.
Stuart and Falcon were unusually good for several days. Stuart and Falcon became useful engines, and all three were happy together for many years. But hard times came. The mines closed one by one, and the engines had little work to do. At last, their line was closed, and people came to buy the engines. "We'll take Stuart and Falcon," they said. But no one wanted Duke. They thought him too old.
Cheer up, Grandpuff,
called Stuart as they went away.
We'll find a nice railway, and then you can come and keep us in order.
They all laughed bravely, but not one of them thought it would ever come true. Duke's driver and fireman oiled and greased him. They sheeted him snugly and said goodbye. They had to go away and find work. Duke was alone, locked up in the shed.
Where's his grace?
He wondered.
It's not like him to forget me.
But his grace had been killed in the war, and the new Duke, a boy, hadn't heard of his little engine.
Oh well,
said Duke to himself.
I'll go to sleep. It will help me to pass the time.
Years passed. Winter torrents washed soil from the hills over the shed. Trees and bushes grew around. You wouldn't have known a shed was there, let alone a little engine asleep inside it. Have you guessed about Stuart and Falcon? Yes, you're quite right. They came to the Thing Controller's railway. He gave them new coats and new names. Stuart became Peter Sam and Falcon Sir Handel. They preferred their new names. That was a long time ago, but they never forgot Grandpuff and often talked about him when alone. They were excited to hear that the Duke was coming to Skarloey and Rhaenyra's 100th birthday, but most disappointed with the Duke who actually came, for he was only a man. But we must say no more, or we'll spoil the next story. Sleeping Beauty. Duke's story soon spread. The engines told Mr. Hugh told the Thing Controller told the owner told His Grace told the Small Controller told the Thin Clergyman, and the Thin Clergyman told the Fat One. That is why, one morning, the two clergymen and the Small Controller were looking at maps.
Our railway,
said the Small Controller,
is laid on the bed of the old one, but swings round to end at the road south of that village. The old line kept straight on. It went north of the village, then to the mountains. The map shows the works at the old station. If Jukes is anywhere, he's there.
Are you writing another book, sir?
Yes,
said the thin clergyman.
but not about you.
He smiled at their downcast faces.
Cheer up.
He went on.
It's about a nice old engine who is lost. But, if you're good, the artist might put you in the picture.
Oh, thank you, sir.
So the clergyman told them about Duke and Falcon and Stuart.
So, you see,
he continued,
poor Duke was left alone.
3 small engines sighed sympathetically.
And we want to find him, and mend him, and make him happy again. Your controller wants to help, but he can't, if you're naughty.
3 small engines promised to be as good as gold. The 3 men spent days and days at the old station. They came up every morning on Bert's train. He always whistled good luck as they walked up the track, but they had nothing in the evening except scratches and torn clothes. They wouldn't give up, though.
Duke's there somewhere.
They said. The fat clergyman found him in the end. Scrambling over a hillock, he trod on something which wasn't there, crashed through a hole, and landed, legs astride, on Duke's saddle tank.
Our sleeping beauty himself,
he shouted. The thin clergyman and the small controller peeped through the hole above.
Excuse me,
enquired Duke.
Are you a vandal? Driver told me vandals break in and smash things.
The fat clergyman ruefully felt his bruises.
Bless you, no.
He laughed.
I'm quite respectable. I dropped in because I couldn't find your door.
And he told Duke about Falcon and Stuart.
So they did remember,
said Duke softly. Then,
does His Grace approve?
Yes, he's coming.
To see me? How kind, and I'm all dirty. That will never do. Please clean me.
So they set to work, and by the time the small controller fetched His Grace, Duke was the cleanest of anyone in the shed. Early next morning, Mike brought workmen and tools. They enlarged the fat clergyman's hole, lifted Duke out, and put him on a low loader to take him away by road.
I'd be ashamed,
Duke protested.
To travel by road, it's indignified.
I'm sorry, Duke,
said His Grace.
But the small railway has no suitable trucks.
Duke gave in then, but so many people came out and greeted him that he felt better.
So they did remember,
he thought happily. Donald was waiting with a flat truck. Everyone cheered when Duke was lifted onto it, and still more when he started along the big railway on the last stage of his journey to his new home. Peter, Sam and Sir Handel were on early turn. They peeped out of the shed.
He's there,
they whispered.
Shh, shh, shh.
Duke opened his eyes.
You woke me up,
he grumbled.
In my young days, engines were...
Seen and not heard, Grandpuff. Remember?
I remember,
said Duke.
2 idle good-for-nothings named Student Falcon.
Good for you, Grandpuff. We're glad you've come home.
We can keep you in order now.
Keep me in order. Impudence, be off.
The pair chuffed away, well content.
Impudent scallywags,
murmured Duke. But his old eyes twinkled, and for the first time in years, he smiled as he dozed in the sun. Ghost Train.
And every year, on the date of the accident, it runs again, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul.
Percy, what are you talking about?
The ghost train. Driver saw it last night.
Where?
Asked Thomas and Toby together.
He didn't say, but it must have been on our line. He says ghost trains run as a warning to others. Ooh.
He went on.
It makes my wheels wobble to think of it.
Pooh.
Said Thomas.
You're just a silly little engine. I'm not scared.
Thomas didn't believe in your ghost,
said Percy next morning. His driver laughed.
Neither do I. It was a pretend ghost on television.
Percy was disappointed, but he was too busy all day with the stone trucks to think about ghosts. That evening, he came back light engine from the harbour. He liked running at night. He coasted along without effort, the rails humming cheerfully under his wheels and signal lights changing to green at his approach. He always knew just where he was, even in the dark.
Crow's Farm Crossing,
he chanted happily.
We shan't be long now.
Sam had forgotten that Mr. Crow wanted a load of lime taken to 40-acre field. When he remembered, it was nearly dark. He drove in a hurry, bumped over the crossing, and sank his cart's front wheels in mud at the field gate. The horse tried hard, but couldn't move it. The cart's tail still fouled the railway. Sam gave it up. He unharnessed the horse and rode back to the farm for help.
There's still time,
he told himself.
The next train isn't due for an hour.
But he'd reckoned without Percy. Percy broke the cart to smithereens and lime flew everywhere. They found no one at the crossing, so went on to the nearest signal box.
Oh,
said the signalman.
What have you done to Percy? He's white all over.
Percy's driver explained.
I'll see to it,
said the signalman.
But you better clean Percy or people will think he's a ghost.
Percy chuckled.
Do let's pretend I'm a ghost and scare Thomas. That'll teach him to say I'm a silly little engine.
On their way, they met Toby, who promised to help. Thomas was being oiled up for his evening train when Toby hurried in, saying,
Percy's had an accident.
Poor engine,
said Thomas.
Botheration, that means I'll be late.
They cleared the line for you.
Toby went on.
But there's something worse.
Out with it, Toby.
Thomas interrupted.
I can't wait all evening.
I've just seen something,
said Toby in a shaky voice.
It looked like Percy's ghost. It said it was coming here to warn us.
Pooh. Who cares? Don't be frightened, Toby. I'll take care of you.
Percy approached the shed quietly and glided through it.
Beep, 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 beep,
he shrieked. As had been arranged, Toby's driver and fireman quickly shut the doors.
Let me in! Let me in!
Said Percy in a spooky voice.
No,
answered Toby.
Not by the smoke of my chimney chim.
I'll chuff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in.
Oh dear,
exclaimed Thomas.
It's getting late. I had no idea. I must find Annie and Clarabelle.
He hurried out the other way. Percy was none the worse for his adventure. He was soon cleaned, but Thomas never returned. Next morning, Toby asked him where he'd been.
Well,
said Thomas.
I knew you'd be sad about Percy, and, I didn't like to intrude. I slept in the goods shed and... Oh.
He went on hurriedly.
Sorry, can't stop. Gotta see a coach about a train.
And he shot off like a jackrabbit. Percy rolled up alongside.
Well,
he exclaimed.
What do you know about
that? Anyone would think,
chuckled Toby,
that our Thomas had just seen a ghost.
Woolly Bear. Gangers had been cutting the line-side grass and cocking it. The fat controller sells the hay to hill farmers who want winter feed for their stock. At this time of year, when Percy comes back from the harbour, he stops where they have been cutting. The men load up his empty wagons and he pulls them to Farquhar. Toby then takes them to the hills. The farmers collect the hay from Toby's top station. When in the wagons, the hay is covered to prevent it blowing about, but on the line side, it is stacked in the open air to dry.
Wheesh!
Percy gave his ghostly whistle.
Don't be frightened, Thomas.
He laughed.
It's only me.
Your ugly fizz is enough to frighten anyone,
said Thomas crossly.
You're like...
ugly indeed. I'm
a green caterpillar with red stripes,
continued Thomas firmly.
You crawl like one too.
I don't.
Who's been late every afternoon this week?
It's the hay.
I can't help that,
said Thomas.
Time's time, and the fat controller relies on me to keep it. I can't if you crawl in the hay till all hours.
Green caterpillar indeed,
fumed Percy.
Everyone says I'm handsome, or at least nearly everyone. Anyway, my curves are better than Thomas's corners.
He took his trucks to the harbour and spent the morning shunting.
Thomas says I'm always late,
he grumbled.
I'm never late, or at least only a few minutes. What's that to do, Thomas? He can always catch up time further on.
All the same, he and his driver decided to start home early. It was most unfortunate that just before they did, a crate of treacle was upset over him. They wiped the worst off, but he was still sticky when he puffed away. The wind rose as they puffed along. Soon it was blowing a gale.
Look at that!
Exclaimed his driver. The wind caught the piled hay, tossing it up and over the track. The gangers tried to clear it, but more always came. The line climbed here.
Take a run at it, Percy,
his driver advised. So, whistling warningly, Percy gathered speed. But the hay made the rails slippery, and his wheels wouldn't grip. Time after time, he stalled with spinning wheels and had to wait till the line ahead was cleared before he could start again. The signalman climbed a telegraph pole, the station master paced a platform, passengers fussed, and Thomas seethed impatiently.
10 minutes late. I warned him. Passengers will complain, and the fat controller...
The signalman shouted. The station master stood amazed. The passengers exclaimed and laughed as Percy approached.
Sorry, I'm late,
Percy panted.
So I should hope,
scolded Thomas, but he spoilt the effect as Percy drew alongside.
Look what's crawled out of the hay,
he chortled.
What's wrong?
Asked Percy.
Talk about hairy caterpillars,
puffed Thomas as he started away.
It's worth being late to have seen you.
When Percy got home, his driver showed him what he looks like in a mirror.
Bust my buffers,
exclaimed Percy.
No wonder they all laughed. I'm just like a woolly bear. Please clean me before Toby comes.
But it was no good. Thomas told Toby all about it. And instead of talking about sensible things like playing ghosts, Thomas and Toby made jokes about woolly bear caterpillars and other creatures which crawl about in hay. They laughed a lot, but Percy thought they were really being very silly indeed. Escape. Douglas had taken the midnight goods to a station on the other railway. He was shunting ready for his return journey when he heard a faint
shh. That sounds like an engine.
He thought. The shh came again. This time it sounded almost despairing.
Who's there?
He asked. A whisper came.
Are you a Fat Controller's engine?
I am proud of it.
Thank goodness. I'm Oliver. We're escaping to your railway, but we've run out of coal and have no more steam.
Is it from scrap you're escaping?
Yes.
Then it's gotta be to help you, but we mun work fast.
Both crews joined in. They took off Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels, and chalked scrap everywhere they could. Douglas marshalled Oliver in front of his train.
No time to turn round.
He panted.
I'll run tender first.
Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo,
yelled the passing diesel.
A steamer's escaping, yoo-hoo.
Douglas puffed firmly on.
Take no notice,
he counselled, but they were stopped before they could clear the station throat. The foreman's lamp shone on Oliver.
Aha!
He exclaimed.
A Western engine.
His light flickered further back.
A Western auto coach. And goods break too? You can't take these.
Can we now?
Said Douglas's driver.
They're all for us. See for yourself.
Douglas's guard showed him the labels and papers. Oliver's crew, hiding in the coach, hardly dared to breathe.
Seems in order,
said the foreman grudgingly.
But it's queer.
Sure, and it is,
began the guard.
But I could tell you queerer.
So could I,
interrupted the foreman.
Right away, guard.
A near thing,
puffed Douglas with relief.
We've had worse,
smiled Oliver.
We ran at night. Friendly signalmen would pass us from box to box when no trains were about. We got on well until Control heard about a mystery train. Then they tried to hunt us down.
What did you do?
A signalman let us hide on an old quarry branch. Driver, fireman, and guard blocked the cutting with rubbish and livery one of the approach rails away. We stayed there for days, with diesels baying and growling like hounds outside. I was very frightened then.
Small blame to you,
said Douglas feelingly. Presently they rumbled over the bridge and onto the Fat Controller's railway.
We're home! They can't catch you now.
Tell Isabel and Toad, please.
Douglas called out the news and heard a joyful ting-a-ling-a-ling, ting-a-ling-a-ling. He was surprised. Oliver chuckled.
That's Isabel,
he said.
There's a bell on her, you see. She's clever. When we go out together, I pull one way and push the other. When I pull, I can see ahead. When I push, I can't. So Isabel keeps a good lookout and rings her bell to talk to me.
You didn't say.
Douglas was impressed.
About this Toad,
he continued.
Is he?
Hold your wheest,
said his driver.
Yon's the works. We mun slip in unbeknownst and find a place for Oliver.
Douglas tried hard to be quiet, but the night foreman heard them and had to be told their secret.
I know just the place,
he said, and showed them an empty siding nicely hidden away. Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away.
Yon's an enterprising engine,
he thought.
I want away here with Donald, but I've been fair to do it on my own. The Fat Controller's engines,
One evening, Thomas brought his last train to the junction. He went for a drink.
I'm going to the big station,
he said to Percy and Toby.
So are we.
They answered.
Do you know?
Percy went on.
I think something's up.
Toby looked at the sky.
Where?
Down here, silly,
laughed Thomas.
How?
Asked Toby reasonably.
Can something be up when it's down?
Look,
said Thomas excitedly.
Look.
7 engines from the other railway were coming along the line.
Hello, Ginty,
whistled Percy.
Hello, Pug. They're friends of mine,
he explained.
I don't know the others.
Ginty and Pug whistled cheerfully as they puffed through the station.
What is all this?
asked Thomas.
The Fat Controller's got a plan,
answered his driver.
And he's going to tell it to us. Come on.
So they followed to the big station at the end of the line where all the engines had gone. The Fat Controller was waiting for them there.
The people of England,
he said,
read about us in the books, but they do not think that we are real.
Shame,
squeaked Percy. The Fat Controller glared. Percy subsided.
So,
he continued,
I am taking my engines to England to show them.
Hooray! Hooray!
The engines whistled. The Fat Controller held his ears.
Silence!
he bellowed.
We start the day after tomorrow at 8 a.m. Meanwhile, as these engines have kindly come from the other railway to take your place, you will show them your work tomorrow.
Next day, as Annie and Clarabelle were going to England too, Thomas and Ginty practiced with some other coaches. Thomas was excited. He began boasting about his race with Bertie.
I whooshed through the tunnel and stopped an inch from the buffers. Like this!
Crash! The buffers broke. No one was hurt, but Thomas's front was badly bent. They telephoned the Fat Controller.
I'll send up some men,
he said.
But if they can't mend Thomas in time, we'll go to England without him.
Next morning, the engines waited at the junction. Toby and Percy were each on a truck, and Duck had pushed them into place behind Edward. Henrietta stood on a siding. The Fat Controller had called her a curiosity.
I wouldn't dream of leaving you behind,
he said.
I'll fit you up as my private coach.
She felt very grand. Gordon, James and Henry were in front. They whistled impatiently. The Fat Controller paced the platform. He looked at his watch.
1 minute more,
he said, turning to the guard.
Beep, beep, beep,
whistled Thomas and panted into the station. Annie and Clarabelle twittered anxiously.
I hope we're not late. It isn't quite 8.
Thomas,
said the Fat Controller sternly.
I am most displeased with you. You nearly upset my arrangements.
Thomas, abashed, arranged himself and the coaches behind Duck, without saying a word. The Fat Controller climbed into Henrietta. The guard blew his whistle and waved his flag. The engines whistled.
Look out, England! Here we come!
And the cavalcade puffed off. The engines stood side by side in a big airy shed. Hundreds of people came to see them and climbed in and out of their cabs every day. They liked it at first, but presently felt very bored, and were glad when it was time to go. The people along their line put the flags out and cheered them home.
We are glad to see you,
they said.
Those others did their best, but they don't know our ways. Nothing anywhere can compare with our Fat Controller's engines.